lesson has been learned in life, a lesson that I met while walking through the park one day. And you can surely bet it's been a while since I have met someone as nice as you. So warm and kind and genuine and loving through and through. Your smile and grace makes one embrace the warmness of your heart. I knew we would become good friends. I knew this from the start. I am thankful that I met someone as lovely as you are. Your gracefulness and smile will take you very far. Thank you. In my imagination, you are with me always, to the far corners of the earth, to the end of all time. In my imagination, you never grow old. Your spirit is as supple as the wings of a bird. In my imagination, the winds of change have assured me that I need seek no more since finding you. You are the greatest of our friends and most dependable. And that is not my imagination. That, my friend, is reality. Thank you. Al Brown used to be a farmer. 5th generation out of Michigan, just north of Jackson, the middle of the state. In 1990, Harold adopted a plant-based diet and became an ethical vegan in 1997. He's a friend of Howard Lyman, who used to be a cattle farmer as well. Harold had an epiphany after meeting a steer named Snickers, after the Snicker bar, at an animal sanctuary. He felt sympathy for cattle, which transformed him. And he mentioned also that as a child working on the farm, he had some feelings about the way the animals were treated. When he went to Cleveland, he found a support group which pushed Harold on the vegan path. He was a mechanic at the time and exposed to vegan principles and practices which Harold embraced. Harold strongly recommends a website entitled Exposing the Humane Myth, Living a Morally Consistent Life. So at this moment, please give a very warm welcome to Harold Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for all being here. You having fun? Yeah. All right. Did you get enough to eat? Yeah. All right. If not, we can raid that truck later. You got anything left? Oh, they do have stuff left. Okay. Well, let me make a little addendum. The website that I recommend is called Humane Myth, and it's humanemyth.org. It was something I helped to, and Lee and a few other people had helped construct. Howard was another person, about developing a website, not just for activists, but for the general public. And sometimes vegans give me a hard time to say, well, you know, the word vegan doesn't appear on that website, on the front page or anything. I said, yeah, because it isn't for you. I said, isn't that what education is about? It's about reaching the people that you're trying to educate on something they don't know anything about. So what it is a website that goes as deep as anybody wants to learn about every animal commodity that's out there and every animal. So it starts out with a page that is kind of innocuous, but here it is. And it's put together from people who have experience in animal agriculture, or agribusiness, I should say, people who have worked in sanctuaries, and those who have had their own experiences and are deep thinkers in this, like James Levesque and Lee and so on, that are way smarter than I am. So we put all this together, and it's a website so people can go and say they pick eggs, so they can start reading and going. And the more they click, the deeper they go down the rabbit hole. And they'll learn everything they need to know about how the whole process works and how it gets to their table. But it also goes through a lot of other stuff is what we're going to talk about. And it's basically this idea of the humane myth. Okay, how many stores do you go in now and you see products, whether it's flesh, whether it's eggs, whether it's dairy products, that say humanely raised or humanely slaughtered?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody sitting here know that's balderdash.
Right.
But the thing is it's codified by the federal government, because there is a Humane Slaughter Act, believe it or not. And the USDA organic standards, while they don't specifically get into what humane practices are, they basically say that there are certain things that have to be provided for an animal. But if you study language at all, and unfortunately I've got a background in linguistics, there's one word that's in the USDA organic standards. If you go to that and then scroll down and down and down till you get to the chapter on animals, there's one word that is so mushy that it makes just about anything possible. So they say that the language of it goes that, well, let's take dairy cows for instance. So if you've got dairy cows, they're going to spend just about their whole lives inside of a barn and moving from one big feed barn to a milking parlor and back and forth, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, in a 24-hour period, and get milk, and then go back to be fed, come back to get milk. Well, this organic standards make it sound great because they say that these cows must have access to fresh air, sunshine, and pasture. Okay, there's the problem, the word access. Now these barns, and you've probably driven by them, they're long, they've got these canvas roll-up windows on the sides, you know, shades like it can go up. So if you roll those up on a sunny day, in the arc of the sun going through the sky, they'll be, for a little while, those cows will have a little sunshine on them, for an hour or two maybe. And then, fresh air, well, they've got fans at the one end of the building, and with these windows rolled up, the wind will blow through, they have access to fresh air. Access to pasture. Now, for all of those of us that live in the frozen wasteland of the north and the Midwest, how do you do that? Well, access to pasture, baled hay, is just cut dried pasture. So you give them a slice of hay, they now have access to what was once pasture.
Yeah.
So sounds all, you know, rosy and everything for these cows. It's not. It's not. And the terms that they come up with for marketing this stuff, like, who wants to throw one out? Give me one of those logos that they put on packaging to
Grass-fed, free range.
free range, grass-fed, pasture-based, from contented cows. Oh Jesus! This is a milk that came out last year. A new company that is marketing mammary excretion of bovine. And what's the name of it? Fairlife. I don't know if you've seen that. It's big in New York. Fairlife milk. If you know, you guys know what it is for the life of a dairy cow is. There's nothing fair about that life at all. But this is what's interesting. It's the language they use to make consumers feel good about what they're buying. And why do they need to do this? Well, there's an interesting dynamic that's gone on in our society. If you go and look at the USDA website for the agricultural census, they do it every 10 years. We're coming up on one pretty soon. In 1950, does anybody want to take a guess at the percentage of the population of the United States that produced food?
25. 50.
50.
80.
You're pretty close. Yeah, you got, no, not that high. It was about 48% in 1950. Does anybody want to take a guess of what it is as of the last census?
5%.
Is 9 years ago?
5.
5? 10. 8? 3. 0.8.
Get that is.
And that's according to USDA's agricultural census. Now, of that 0.8, we'll just say it's 1%, just for clarity in our minds. 1% of that 1% that's producing all the food in the United States,
Yeah.
it is 2/3 of that 1% produce, or no, it's 1/3 of that 1% is producing 66.6% of all the food in the United States. This is the corporate consolidation of food production in the United States. We went from having nearly half of the population in the United States producing food for the market in 1950 down to less than 1%. And that less than 1% takes into account all of your little farms, all your hobby farms, all of your small scale farms, anything under 5,000 animals, vegetable farms, roadside stands, that's all counted. That's all part of that. There is a shift in this though. There are farmers who are the people, young people, millennials in particular, who are going back to the land and they're farming. Unfortunately, a lot of them are buying into this paleo crap and other stuff, and they're by and large raising pigs and goats.
Oh, wow.
In our area in New York, in western New York, it's crazy. It's insane the amount of people, these young people are raising pigs. But they say, it's humane. It's connecting back to your food, and so on and so forth. They have so many stories to tell themselves. And here's something just from an activist point of view. When you engage people like this, and you talk to them, and you ask them, why do you do this? Why do you feel it's necessary to raise these animals? Or why do you feel it's necessary just to eat animal products? And then actively listen to what they're saying, the language they're using. It's the language of addiction. It's the way it's no different than listening to an alcoholic or anybody else who has substance abuse problem. It's the same language, the same rationale, because they don't know exactly why they're doing it, but they do it. And any kind of moral consideration outside of themselves is moot. Which, for people with substance abuse, those moral questions, what am I doing to my family? What am I doing to my partner? What am I doing in society at large? That's not a question that they ask themselves. So that's why the language reflects from one to the other. The labeling gets crazy too. For instance, how many of you have seen vegetarian eggs? Okay, you got to think about that for a minute. If you know how chickens are raised and what they are as a being who eats basically everything that's on the ground, they eat insects, they eat worms, they eat seeds, plants, grass, a little bit of everything. But if they're 100% vegetarian fed, but they're also called on the same package as free range vegetarian fed chickens. That means they spent their whole life in a barn being fed grain. They never went outside. They never saw the sunshine. In the dark by and large, but if they're free range, the way the end run on that is, again, that word access. So all they have to do is put a little door in the side of the barn, and then they usually have a gravel area with a chain link fence around it. They can go out and run around it. But the thing is that they found out that they don't like to do that. Why? Because as soon as they stick their head up, they look up. There's no overhead protection from the predators, so they don't tend to use it. But they have access to it, therefore it's not false advertising. Now, the other aspect of this is that while we call it the happy meat phenomenon, people are always looking for a pass on continuing to do the things they shouldn't be doing. Or as my friend Howard Lyman says, people like good news about bad habits. Well, for instance, let's take these legislative propositions that come up every so often to ban certain cage practices, whether it's crates, cages. Well, if you ever read, you can go online, because whenever these things become a proposition in the state, you can go online and read the proposition. The word ban or eliminate doesn't exist in any of these propositions. But they're telling activists, we're banning cages. Go out and grab, and let's get, the signatures we need to get this on the ballot. And it's usually referendums. But in any case, they need this to get done. So they're basically lying to well-meaning activists for them to go out and be the army to get the signatures. But the surprising thing is when you look at how this plays out in the marketplace, people will go to, in most states, will pass these things unanimously because these are consumers going to vote. They go in and say, I voted to ban confinement cages in my state.
Mm-hmm.
But I got curious about this. How does this actually play out? There's a agricultural market service, and guess what? It's called USDA AMS, Agricultural Market Service. Every 24 hours, they're putting like everything, every commodity sold in the United States is on there. Animals, fruits, nuts, seeds, vegetables. Everything that gets scanned in a grocery store ends up in that database for the USDA. Well, I kept track of this, so every month I was looking. This is California that I looked at, and when Proposition 2 was going on there. So I was looking every month. And at the end of 2 months, people in certain animal organizations were saying, this is a victory. We won. And I said, no, you didn't win. Why? Because they said, because the sale of caged eggs went down by 4%. Yeah, they did. If you go to the EMS, went down by 4%. But the sale of cage-free eggs that are marked as cage-free went up 26%. Because these initiatives take 10 to 12 years for their implementation. But when people go in and vote, they made a moral decision on their part, they feel. And they go to the store thinking it's happened overnight. And the net effect of what happens to the animals is zero. But the people believe, it gives them a pass on this. And they feel good about themselves, and they feel good about their purchases. And unfortunately, we have a few large animal, we call them advocacy organizations, that promote this stuff. And they're blindsiding us in the work we're trying to do. Because the most important thing you can do is to understand what veganism means to you. And I think the definition that Lee gave you, and the framework she gave you, and I encourage you to read her book, because it's a workbook on how to understand what animal liberation is and what we're about. But the thing is the most important thing you have to do is to protect your activism. We have to find ways that we can identify, we self-identify what we do, and we value it, or even as a community. And people that we work with, people that hold the same principles and values that we do. But you need to protect it, because it's not only the industry that's going to try to co-opt and manage you. Again, James Levesque has a great essay that you can read on the Tribe of Heart website. It's called Invasion of the Movement Snatchers. The meat industry went to a Madison Avenue PR firm. It was RDJ or something like that. Anyway, they asked him, how can we manage, not control, but manage, not get rid of, but manage activists? He said, yeah, it's pretty simple, because we've done it in other fields, environmentalism and human rights and other areas. They said, this is the template. When you read it, you're going to go, oh my God, it's so simple. But then you'll start seeing how it's played out in so many different ways, in so many different arenas, but it definitely played out in the animal movement. And the when you realize this, when you see the modus operandi of how the industry figured out to manage us, then you say, okay, I can see the forest through the trees. And now I know how to protect my activism.
That's right.
Because it happens, unfortunately. And I would pull the curtain open so you could see the wizard, but I can't do that for you. Buddha was right. Buddha said the only truth in life are the things you directly experience. Those are the things you can hold on to, and you say, I know for damn sure that this is true, are the things you've directly experienced. Everything you've read, everything you've been told, those are beliefs. And if the beliefs are strong enough, they become a faith. But still, it's not a truth. It's not your truth. And each of our truths is a little different. I mean, every person is different. There isn't like this universal idea, or this universal truth that's written in stone. It's malleable. But there are core principles that we have to adhere to, and we have to protect. And this comes to the other part of the title of this talk, striving to live a morally consistent life. From my background, this has been a really tough thing to do. My indoctrination was so deep into herding culture that when I started learning about animal rights theory, animal liberation theory, and I started to, that's why in the introduction, you know, I was somebody who, on a plant-based diet for 6 years. And in 1997, that's when I became a vegan. It's because I had this intellectual framework in my head. It was academic. But until the head and the heart come together, you're not working as a whole. I'll be quick about this. I hear thunder. So we strive, and then the striving. Well, actually, is that thunder?
It's thunder and lightning.
There's certain bits of wisdom I carry around with me, and bear with me. It's falling apart. I better retype it. But when it comes, striving is an important word to me, because the thing is anybody perfect at being a vegan? No, there's no such thing as a perfect vegan, period.
That's true.
Because I drive a car, I kill insects. Am I perfect? Hell no. But this is what someone once said. A principle is a principle, and in no case can it be watered down because of our incapacity to live it in practice. We have to strive to achieve it, and the striving should be conscious, deliberate, and hard. Gandhi said that. That is what striving is. Do we ever attain perfection? No, and we never will. But that doesn't mean we can't, that we're not to work as damn hard as we can toward that end, toward those principles, toward those values. Because the world is going to be a better place. It's becoming a better place already, man. The way veganism is spreading and this thought process is working, this goes back to the thing about why the industry is scrambling to figure they're losing market share in dairy, believe it or not, huge time. Plant-based milks are taking over. They're outselling cow dairy right now.
Good.
Yay! But Debbie Downer, we're producing more milk than we ever did. So where does that go? Right, it's 10-to-1 concentration. It's the most effective way of getting rid of excess fluid milk.
Yeah.
So watch television and see the advertisements for how much more cheese can they put on a pizza? How much more?
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day when I used to see when I was a kid, and I used to see a Little Caesars commercial. It's get a pizza and get garlic sticks. They don't even advertise garlic sticks anymore. It's mozzarella sticks. That just dawned on me the other day. Yeah, double cheese. you know, but the thing is, people are shifting, and why? There's this guy who is I'd be nice, he's a spokesperson for the animal industry. And I run into him at Cornell when he visits there, and I have coffee with him. And he is on just about every ag radio and television station across the Midwest. And what Howard Lyman is to our movement, he is to the meat and dairy industry, and feed and stuff industry too. Well, I was talking to him, and I said, so what's your biggest challenge? He said that people don't know farm animals. I said, yeah, that's what sanctuaries are for. He said, screw you. He said, that's not what I'm talking about. And it's a good point. He said, we have to figure out a way to open the barn doors a little bit wider so people can see a little more what's going on, but only enough that makes them feel good. Now, why is that? Well, it's because we are now a little over a generation in America, think 1950, think today. Most people live in urban areas.
Yep.
And the only way they can think of animals is with domesticated companion animals. So cats, dogs, iguanas, birds. And the thing is that their own market research has shown that when people think of farm animals, they have no concept. It's such an abstract to think of what a cow is, other than how they anthropomorphize through their commercials that they're these happy, beautiful, fuzzy animals, and happy pigs and happy animals, but they anthropomorphize them to be something. Even some of them speak English. So the problem is for them is that the only way that consumers can will think of farm animals is they will anthropomorphize them through their companion animals, cats and dogs. And that's getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. This is where we're winning. It's because as people do more work with rescues and get to know these individuals that we are taking care of, cats and dogs in our lives, and then we think of them and the individuals, the persons that they are, and then help people make that connection that for farm animals it's no different.
Right.
It's no different. And this is undoing the industry in the United States because of our really messed up advertising that they do. But they've created their own monster. And now we just got to steer Frankenstein back toward it. So a lot of good things are happening. And it's happening faster and faster. So I would like to say thank you for being here. Protect your activism, and let's beat the rain, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Lee Hall was an adjunct professor at Rutgers on immigration and animal law, taught at Widener University in Delaware, specializing in environmental law. Attempted to stop killing of deer in Valley Forge National Park. Did a writing project for the UN Encyclopedia of Sustainability. Became a vegan in 1983 after attending a rock concert in London. She found a leaflet left on chairs. She looked around. She saw someone with a backpack. Very first person she ever met that was a vegan. And this person who was putting these leaflets on was explaining everything about the reasons for becoming a vegan, about the terrible pain and suffering that animals go through, etc., etc. And that was 1983 in London, England. And Lee became a vegan at that point. Lee's latest book is entitled On Their Own Terms, Animal Liberation for the 21st Century. Having said that, I would like to bring up the first speaker. Please give a very, very warm welcome for Lee Hall.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. And where's Nadine LaFawn? That was so superb.
Yes.
Thank you. Come back, I hope. And American Vegan Society for finding Nadine LaFawn. Well done. Mm-hmm. It's been wonderful listening to this music. And enjoying all the beautiful food from Wildflower and Self-Love. Thank you. And Christina Martin, Chef Christina Martin is here. Thank you. And thanks to the volunteers and to the American Vegan Society and everybody who is here supporting this day, regardless of what the weather forecast originally was. This is, the name of the presentation, as you probably already know, is Why Vegan? Let Me Count the Ways. Vegan for your health, for healing the environment, for fair food sources, and for animal liberation. And I have, we could call those 4 pillars, or we could call those 4 threads. How many for pillars? How many for threads? I think we got a few more threads. All right, I'll go with the threads theme. So the weaving of the 4 threads of why vegan and the ways that I have counted is something that I would do in my classwork. So if I were doing animal law, I would bring in the point of being veganism and how it connects to animal law. So if I was doing environmental law, developing a course, I would make sure that I put in the connection between what we do in our lives every day and our eating habits and what we're trying to do for the environment in legal ways. So that was, and you might notice that Beretta said I was an adjunct professor. And that's in fact the case. I'd just like to tell you something about the academic world because I think it is really relevant to every one of us here. It turns out that when statistics are looked at as far as people and their views on climate change and their views on emissions and whether climate change exists and whether we should do something about it, there's a correlation with education. So because of that, our entire environment, our future, our hope of integrating humanity into a bio-community with respect has a connection to people's appreciation for and support for education. And what I have seen, and why I'm no longer teaching, is the schools, and I have to include the one that I've most recently taught at, and that's Widener. By the way, Widener is the only law school in Delaware, so this is even more significant to tell you this, that I was told no, there would be no chance of full-time. And in fact, the dean was offering buyouts for the tenure and tenure-track faculty who existed still. In other words, you're talking about a law school who is going to hire people for instructional staff who they're not going to make any long-term commitment to. In fact, they don't know from term to term whether they'll be teaching. And there's a term that has arisen called the new faculty majority. And what the majority is people who are not, they have no benefits, and there's no committed future. And so it is made up of part-time and adjunct instructional staff. And that is the majority of the faculty across the board now in the United States. So you are talking about from community colleges, universities, and grad schools, and I'm seeing it's happening in law schools. This is the way things are going, to the extent that the American Association of University Professors most recently put the figure at 76% part-time and adjunct. 76%. So, but you can't keep a good vegan down. And so I'm extra thankful to the American Vegan Society, because the American Vegan Society has a speakers bureau, and this is one example of the educational work that can be done. There are workarounds. So, without institutional support, I'm an indie author and have come out with a book that I think weaves the four threads together. And I have found ways that educators are being supported through crowdfunding. There's a new thing now on the internet where people come together and they actually fund things that that they believe in need to be done. It may even be $1 a month, and people chip in and they crowdfund for, in my case, some educational outreach every month. Some example of educational outreach every month. So thank you to the American Vegan Society for being one of the educational providers in our society. The first one was health. So when we're talking about health as the first thread, I'm looking at a jackfruit and chickpeas and wildflower, the beautiful salads. You're my favorite salad in the world. And so the healthful offerings that, hi Vinny, that you do with love as the first ingredient. So health. The term self-love I really, really like for veganism, self-love, because it's impossible, and you've written this out on the truck, it's impossible to extend profound respect to others without self-respect. So it starts with self-love, and then, as you say, Vinny and Christy, as you say, it also works the other way. Once you respect others is when you truly, authentically respect yourself. So the question becomes, what are we doing as far as cultivating care for the one body that's ours? And that doesn't mean we're in perfect physical shape without any questionable habits or indulgences. But I think that it does mean a journey to the interior of the self. So for example, if we have been struggling with addictions, and I will admit to being one who has, we are looking for the causes of self-harm. So when we do this journey into the interior, we tend to find out that there is trauma deep in the background of this struggle to care, to let go of things that weren't good for us, and to start craving the things that are actually good for us. And so wildflower and self-love, thank you, because you're making these healthful foods so attractive and easy to crave. On this continent mainly came here as children of migrant families. Many of us were either pressed here or forced here in some form of diaspora. Diaspora being the dispersal of people from their homelands. And without even sometimes knowing what our ancestral history was. And to give you an example of something that surprised me, I live in Chester County, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, and I would hike along the railways. Now this shouldn't have surprised me because I taught immigration law and I knew the history of the Chinese railway workers in California and how that became the beginning of immigration law. Immigration law is really anti-immigration law. It was a way to stop people from coming in, and that began with, a big part of it, the immigration law began with the Chinese workers. So on the railroad. So then I heard that where I hiked along the railroad, there's a mass grave, and there were the Irish workers buried there. And so I did some studying into the Irish workers who were buried at the railroads, and it turns out there are quite a few mass graves. And there was a mass grave in the Northeast that I read about, and it had my family name on it, and it had been, the bodies were underneath an actual cemetery. So there was a hidden mass grave underneath a cemetery. And it turns out that some people in a school excavated, and they found out that this is the bodies of Irish railway workers. So we all have a story that we may only partially know. And I think it's important to put this together with making changes that are healthful for ourselves. And when we look at veganism, we, as vegans or aspiring vegans or pro-vegans or vegan curious people, we go to the definition and we find out what was going on when the vegans created this movement. And they were doing it in one very big sense to heal. Because they said, they used the word wholesome. And I've heard people say, oh, if somebody's a vegan for your health, it's not really a vegan. Because if you're really vegan, you do it for the animals. So they're not so committed. But then when I turned to the definition, which was fully formed by 1951 by the Vegan Society in England, it says that the vegan diet is derived entirely from, and I quote, fruits, nuts, vegetables, grains, and other wholesome non-animal products, and excludes flesh, fish, fowl, eggs, honey, and animal milk and its derivatives. So why were they doing this? Why were they deciding what could and could not be in the diet? They were doing it because it was a principle applied to diet. And they said, for example, if the vegan principle, so they're not saying it's a diet, they're not saying veganism was a diet. They're saying that the diet flows from a principle. And there's a difference there. And for example, if the vegan principle is applied to diet, it can be at once seen why it must be vegetarian in the strictest sense, and why it cannot contain any foods derived from animals. Now they go to explain the difference between the vegetarian and the vegans who they set out to become. They said, one may be a vegetarian for a variety of reasons: humanitarian, health, or a mere preference for such a diet. The principle is a matter of personal feeling and varies accordingly. Veganism, however, is a principle that man has no, and they're writing in the language of 1951, so they said that man has no right to exploit the creatures for his own ends. There's the principle, and no variation occurs. Imagine a non-exploitative society where no one, regardless of human or non-human, was exploited. Imagine if we loved ourselves that much that we could love each other that much. And it reminds me of something that I read that Mary Lawrence said. And Mary's here, so Mary, if you want to stand up and so people know who this is who said this, because it's so beautiful and so to the point. Tell people you're plant-based if you want them to know you changed your diet. Tell them you're vegan if you want them to know you intend to change the system. So the second thread is for the environment, and I'm not going to cite a lot of studies, maybe two. And this one is 2014, and it was in the Journal of Climatic Change by Peter Scarborough, University of Oxford. Scarborough and the colleagues there collected data on the true diets of more than 50,000. I think it was closer to 60,000. Vegan people who self-identified as vegans, vegetarians, fish eaters, and meat eaters. And it turned out, the study showed that the difference with greenhouse gases between the average meat-focused eater and the average vegan eater, the difference in greenhouse gases was 2.5 times over for the meat-focused, flesh-focused diet. It was 2.5 times as much greenhouse gases. Wow! Right there, say no more, right? That's it. How can we not care about the climate, realize what this is doing, and decide to transform ourselves? Of course, people in the environmental community, and I met them when I got my second law degree in environmentalism, they would say, well, buy local. It's not, you don't have to, or they would say, I don't have to make that switch because I live there's chickens next door, and I just get the local eggs. Hi, Gail. I just saw you. And it turns out that, and this is the second out of two studies, this is it for the studies, Christopher Weber and Scott Matthews, they're environmental engineering professors at Carnegie Mellon. So they did a study on the reduction of greenhouse gases if you were to be a locavore. So this is local all the time. Who does this? I mean, nobody really does this, right? Go locavore all the time, every day. But they found out that even if you did only local food every day, your max in terms of reducing your greenhouse gases could only be about 4 or 5%. That's not really a big deal. And so why is this? Well, it turns out that, say those folks next door with those chickens, the local eggs, they drive to the feed store. Okay, so it's feed. They drive to the feed store. The feed comes from Canada or the Midwest. And then it has to go somewhere to be aggregated, bagged. And then it has to be trucked to that retail shop. So put this all together, and you see how it goes? When people give you the locavore argument, make sure you bring up the feed. The third threat. Oh, one more thing before that. I came up with this concept which belongs to all of us, I think. Because once we know this, we look at the folks who do the divestment. Like I think Harvard and there are a number of universities who are trying to press their universities to divest from fossil fuels. So take Exxon and Shell and the fossil fuels out of our portfolios. We don't want the university involved in it, right? So there's a movement to divest. And I think our movement would be called dietary divestment. And I think we have a real case for a campaign in dietary divestment, the diet, and divesting from the climate change effects that people have when they continue to support animal agribusiness companies. Okay, so the third thread is vegan for fair food sources. And I'll go at fair trade. I love fair trade. I love the symbols. If I get a package of coffee or tea or chocolate, so I always got to have a fair trade. And I won't buy it if I don't have the extra money to afford it. I will not buy it because I'm not going to buy slavery chocolate, right? Or coffee or tea, right? And slavery chocolate most of the cheap chocolate is slavery. And these companies know it. And there's kids enslaved in the Ivory Coast. These companies know it, and they're some of the wealthiest families in the United States. So nothing's worth that. I mean, I will forego chocolate if that's all there is. But when I see chocolate and it says fair trade and there's animal products in it, then I'm thinking, how fair is it really? So, I mean, how can we expand the idea, and that's another campaign, right? How can we expand the idea of fair trade so that everyone's treated fairly who can feel, who has a life experience on Earth, right? If we are serious about addressing hunger as well, and that's a huge fairness issue around the world hunger, I think it's a fourth of the people go to bed hungry. It's a real issue. And the vegan diet would make the most sense. We have all heard forever, right? It's well known that the 1 acre of land can support on the average about 10 times the value in protein if you're doing beans and vegetables on it as opposed to grazing. And there's a statistic that the grains we grow in the US, 70% of them go to what? Feed, not food for people. And several countries in the global south are giving up huge amounts of land to grow soybeans to send to animal agribusiness in the wealthier countries. So that's the issue of not just the Amazon rainforest, but many valuable ecosystems throughout the world. Egypt is a particularly illustrative case. In Egypt, for 25 years, encouraged by the U.S. Agency for International Development, also called U.S. Aid. And think about that this is called U.S. Aid when we look at what happened here for 25 years. They invested, the Egyptian government invested heavily in animal agribusiness, and they got to the point where they grew more feed than food. Winners in this cycle were the big U.S. companies such as Cargill, which runs about half the world's grain market. So we see that poor farmers were really harmed, not helped. And when you convince financially, I shouldn't say poor, but financially poor, because who's poor is not for any of us to judge, right? How poor somebody feels. But financially poor is a fact, right? So they'll be getting involved in switching to feed markets because it's lucrative, right? And then they will have to depend on the annual purchase of patented seeds from particular companies. They get in a cycle where then they become beholden to a particular company to buy their seeds. Monsanto has genetically altered vegetables so that they will become resistant to the company's own weed-killing product. Roundup may poison the fishes, earthworms, spiders and mites and beetles, and also increase the risk to farm workers. People will say, oh, why do I need to buy fair trade bananas or whatever? You know, there's a big husk here. It's not one of the dirty dozen or whatever. What about the workers, right? So environmental toxins from modified crops then go into the soil. The crops themselves become toxic into the soil, and then they threaten the earthworms that have to be there and aerate the soil. So a growing movement believes there are better ways to interact with the earth and the other animals who inhabit it. And it actually comes out of the vegan community. The name of this subgroup, I guess we all probably support it, is Vegan Organics. All right, so the Vegan Organic Network started in England, and offshoots of the, and I'm not going to go into this because Harold knows so much about it and he comes next. Then the question is, so if people show us how to do schoolyard gardens, right, and if they show us how to do community gardens and so forth, and they show us how to, the big thing is, can we really get away from the animal manure, right? Okay, so you've gone organic, but is it vegan organic? Did you get away from the animal inputs? And the answer is yes. And I'll give two examples. One is in Guatemala, and Honduran and Guatemalan farmers, there were 45,000 in this group of farmers that used mucuna beans as cover for hillside soil. And in fact, they came up with 3 times the amount of corn that they had before they did the green manure. So that was a very big project, and it worked out very well. Then there was a project of 200,000 Brazilian farmers, and they used plant-based manures, and they doubled their wheat and their corn yields. So it can work. Vegan for Animal Liberation is the 4th thread, and I'm just going to throw in a surprise thread at the end. But when we're talking about animal liberation, now I told you about the crowdfunding, right? So there are people who are on my studio, and it's a site called Patreon. There are people who are funding, but they're also participating, right? So they want me to go out and do these talks, so I said, well, you need to be involved in this too. So cough it up. Tell me what your reason is for being vegan, because I want you to be part of this. And I heard back from Vance Lemkel of Philadelphia. Okay, and Vance said, well, I can't claim it's for the animals, since I don't know which animal out there will actually ever benefit from my lifestyle. I'll get back to that in a minute, because that's profound. Okay? But for me, Vance said, the reason is self-identity. In the early 80s, I felt a dissonance between who I felt that I was or could be and who I was being by continuing to do something that I felt was wrong. So for Vance, it's not that the expanding ranges of vegan products, it's not that we have facts to share, it's to Vance, and Vance says this is the key reason that people who eat animal products do too. It's self-identity. So it's the identity for somebody who encounters a possibility, they can identify with it. Well, how do they identify with it? There are people who are samples. Beretta and I were talking about this. People who are samples, leading the way, and they showed Beretta, oh yes, I could, this is how I could identify, because I don't want the dissonance of doing something wrong. You even used terminology like Vance used, and then you said who it was. And it was Jay Dinshaw and Freya Dinshaw. So you had the samples, and you said, scientific proof.
That's right.
So we are all, those of us who are aspiring vegans or have been vegan for a while, we become walking proof that there's a basic human capacity to live vegan, which is a pretty cool role that we play. Vance's comment said something about dissonance between who we can be and continuing to do something that we felt was wrong. So that brings me back to 1983. Beretta went into it. I was at a rock concert and I met somebody. I didn't go and watch the band. I listened to, we had a conversation because this person put leaflets on all the chairs, and I wanted to figure out what this person was about. Who would put leaflets on all the chairs? You would really have to care about something very deeply, and I wanted to know why. And when it was explained to me how all the different ways we use animals, because the holidays were coming up, so it was going to be a goose on the table, and it was going to be furs from one spouse to another, and it was going to be puppies who were bought as though they were commodities and maybe left in the back for after they grow up, all sorts of things that I remember back in my childhood seeing or somehow experiencing or participating in. And here was my dissonance. I couldn't see myself as part of a master class because that would contradict my feminism. And to me, feminism is defined as rejecting a dominator mentality. That's all it is. Rejecting a dominator mentality. So how could I be part of this class who dominates all the others? Is there really a way out of this? Is there a way to reject this? And Robin, who was my example, said, yes, let me show you. However long it takes. You ask me questions, I'll be here. Wow. So Vance says, I'm talking about this on the website, and Vance comes back and says, wow, I became a feminist about the same time you became a vegan. When I learned the basic facts about patriarchal systems, the injustice was clear and not something I wanted to be supporting. Given the fair-minded individual I thought I was, once I learned about male privilege, so often conveniently invisible to those who profit by it, it made it easier for me then to examine how else I might be benefiting from privilege. And it was clear that my relationship to non-human animals was a similar unjust privilege needing to be redressed. And at that time, I did not have or know all the facts about dairy that made it so clear, the ties between feminism and dairy, but those I received at the North American Vegetarian Summerfest, and then I went vegan. The other thing, going back to the first thing about, I don't know any animal who would benefit from my lifestyle, which at first might sound funny because you might think, well, there's a lot, right? But no, what Vance did was significant. Vance removed heroism from the picture and stepped back. Vance wasn't going to sense veganism as a rescue. Okay? Vance was not going to be a hero. And then now you go back to the 1951 definition, and it resonates with that. It says, in a vegan world, notice the absence of heroism here, or rescue. In a vegan world, the creatures would be reintegrated within the balance and sanity of nature. A great and historic wrong whose effect on the course of evolution must have been stupendous would be righted. And here's the real zinger. The idea that his fellow creatures might be used for man for self-interested purposes would be so alien to human thought as to be almost unthinkable. Okay, so you wouldn't think these animals benefited because you wouldn't have thought to exploit them. You wouldn't be in the position of saying you're doing such a great thing for anyone because you wouldn't have exploited them. Wow. So in the definition it says, in this light, veganism is not so much welfare as liberation for the creatures and for our own minds and hearts. Not so much for an effort to make the present relationship bearable as an uncompromising recognition that because it is in the main one of master and slave, it has to be abolished before something better and finer can be built. And I'd like to add a fifth thread that I was thinking about as I was preparing to come here, and that's for the community. Beretta, your bio, it says that you're the only vegan in your family.
That's correct.
I hope we can say that we're all here for you and for each other. I hope we can say we can all strive to empathize with each other. I hope we can say that we can provide each other a family. I think that's very important to say because in the vegan community, keeping a vegan organization going is very difficult. So the support and the caring among the people who come to events like this, particularly when it was going to be thunderstorming. I mean, I'm not saying you should be considering yourself a hero, because Vance wouldn't want that, but you are doing a great thing. So it's just, there can be competition, there can be little groups jostling for the prime space in the activism world, and so we need to think about this. We're committed to a great cause. We're going to see friction. Filmmaker James Levesque once told me, a commitment to a great cause is a solid foundation to build our inner lives upon, and also one virtually guaranteed to bring turbulence into the course of our lives. One thing that would help, I think, not just manage our tension, but also relieve it, would be safety. The refuge of knowing that when we speak out or we walk away from a situation based on principle, we won't lose the ability to keep a roof over our heads. So the fifth thread is the importance of treating each other as family. So we know that we have other vegans in our family because vegans are our family. And the more identifiable vegan spaces, and so we are here today, the American Vegan Society, identifiable vegan space, the more that we can make these work, the more opportunities vegans will find to have surroundings that celebrate our veganism, that offer us family, that sustain us not just producers in the world, but as vegans. And so vegan enterprise, not just what companies that make vegan products, but vegan-run enterprises matter. Supporting vegan-run enterprises matter. Let's just do a quick sample, okay? Let's say it's a house cleaning business, okay? And so it's started by a vegan. And the benefits for the success of this business are several. The vegan-run enterprise, we could also say, Wildflower Vegan Cafe is a sample. Okay, a vegan-run enterprise will seek ways to avoid toxic chemicals because they're tested on animals, because they're harsh on the environment and unhelpful for beings inside the building. Okay, as a vegan-run undertaking succeeds, it can make increasingly stronger decisions on fair trade and compensation for work. But it needs to have the support of the community to get there. The entity possibly could sustain one or more vegans in a supportive work environment where mutual support and even cooperative work relationships could flourish. We live in a critical time. We're just weighed down by humanity's sheer mass and our human addiction for domesticating other life, and people's addiction like consumerism. The biosphere now faces climate crisis. It faces an ever-worsening extinction period. So many vegans know this, but are financially forced to work in places where authentic respect is sidelined, or else they face financial failure. So support for vegan-run work and the vegan groups that identify as those who will keep changing the system is essential to strengthen us, to enable thought and advocacy from our ever-growing community of vegans. And I'm going to close this with another quote from the crowdfunded website. And this comes from a vegan in Western New York whose name is Maureen Sheener, who says, kind of an uplifting note, it's so easy being vegan these days. When I first became vegetarian many years ago, we had to make our own tofu burgers. There was no manufactured soy or milk or soy cheese. Forget about eating out. Forget about eating out. And now, of course, the mainstream supermarkets and the restaurants. So Maureen says there are a gazillion vegan cookbooks covering every angle of veganism, plus support groups abound on Facebook. Get with it. Vegan is the way to go. And I said, okay, thank you, Maureen, for being part of the garden party and our movement. Great point about social dining, social media, social support among vegans, and why there has never been a better time to join the vegans than now. Thank you.
Hello, George McDermott, my friend. This is Glendora.
Hi, Glendora. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How are you doing, George McDermott, down in Maryland?
I'm just heading to the Court of Federal Claims.
Now, would you read us that law that I got the idea you said it did away with our Constitution?
Just a second. That's what I'm sending you guys to court right now.
Oh,
Let me get it. I'll read it to you, okay?
okay. George McDermott is in Washington, D.C. right now. helping others.
Hold on a second, okay?
Yep. We enjoy it. Satisfaction guaranteed. Okay, George.
Okay,
Get as close as you can to your mic, to your camera.
okay. It starts out as the statutes replaced with international law circa 1933, December 9th, 1945.
Read that again, George. Read that again.
Statutes replaced with international law.
Statutes replaced
Statutes,
with international law.
circa 1933, December 9th, 1945. The International Organization and Immunities Act relinquished every public office of the United States to the United Nations. Source, the government, and the source is government publication, government agents acting as offshore statute merchants whenever the form in which the government functions, anyone entering into the arrangement with the government takes the risk of having accurately ascertained that he who purports to act for the government stays within the bounds of his authority.
Now, I want you to read that again, please, would you?
Whatever, okay, the government agents acting as offshore statute merchants, whatever the form in which the government functions, anyone entering into an arrangement with the government takes the risk of having accurately ascertained that he purports to act for the government stays within the bounds of his authority.
Well, now, what's that mean?
That means that if you take an oath of office to be an agent of the government, any agent, you have an oath of office and you've sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, which is the rule of law of the nation. And that's, you hear congressmen state that all the time.
Yes,
Okay?
and everybody else does. Give me an example.
Well, the President of the United States takes an oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But when they act outside of that oath of office and they start to, as in our current case, we have agents who in his office who are subverting the Constitution, they should be charged with treason. They have illegally helped someone get elected to an office who he didn't qualify for, or he's using for his own personal benefit or authority.
I don't get it, George. I don't get it.
Okay, well, let me finish reading this, because this is just, it's a fairly long document. You keep stopping me in the middle of it. Okay?
Well, I have to, honey, because I don't understand it. Okay, I have to stop
I understand most people do not. This is published law, okay? I told you I would send it to you, and you said no. The scope of the authority may be explicitly defined by Congress or be limited by delegated legislation properly exercised through the rulemaking power. And this is so even though, as here, the agents themselves may have been unaware of their limitations upon his authority.
What's that mean, George?
Well, when you take an oath of office, you have limitations. Your limitations are that you have to act within the bylaws of that corporation. The United States of America is a for-profit private corporation. All the agencies and the sub-agencies and within the government are all separate private for-profit corporations that have their own bylaws, but all of them are all those bylaws are tied to the U.S. Constitution, our Bill of Rights. Okay?
No, I still don't get it.
Okay. Do you want me to continue with this, or you want me just
Yeah, I would like to know, you said that they did away with the Constitution.
well, in 1933 and 1945, it actually started in 1871 when they took and they abolished the Constitution, the original Constitution of the United States of America, and they transferred the United States of America into a for-profit corporation under Title 28 USC Rule 3002, Section 15A states that the United States is a federal corporation and not a government, including the Judiciary Procedures Section.
Well, why did they do that?
Because foreign interference, big money. You've been saying this for years. The Rothschilds, the banks, the international bankers, all got together and they subverted our law, and they've put a lot of lawyers in place, and these lawyers have just became congressmen and senators, and they believe that they can modify our Constitution without constitutional amendment. I can't understand how they could possibly have dissolved the original Constitution and incorporated it to a new federal corporation without an amendment to our Constitution passed by all the states as required.
Yeah, that's right, George.
So how can they possibly do this?
So it's not a...
It's subversion, and it gets even worse now. Now, it goes on here. It says, neither the for-profit government nor the foreign government state merchant / agent has access to sovereign immunity. As a member of a corporation, the government never exercised its sovereignty. It acts merely as a corporator and exercises no other power in the management of the affairs of the corporation.
So this is the international bankers taking over the USA?
Yes. Yes, the lawyers, the international, the Bar of England and the American Bar Association, they took over our country without even raising a sword.
Yeah.
They did it all. They did it all under the cloak of darkness in private chambers, and it's just recorded law.
And you wrote to every member of the Congress to say if these two laws are in effect?
I wrote to every member of the U.S. Congress and Senate, and I mailed it off as video, posted at secretjustice.com, program 1100 and I think it's 1146 and 47, where I was right at the mail office of the U.S. House and Senate, and paid for it out of my own pocket to print it and to mail it. I gave them all 15 days to May 15th to respond. Not one response from anybody, not one response from any judge. I petitioned every member of the Court of Federal Claims judges, every judge individually, every judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, every judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, every judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland, every judge for the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals individually, every judge of the Supreme Court of the United States, asking them to certification of a question of law whether this amendment by the Congress of the United States is the rule of law. And not one response.
And how many people was that, George? 500?
Oh, so it's almost 800. by the
Almost
time you go
800.
to all the members, 535 members just to the Congress.
And you did this by United States mail?
I did it by United States mail. I made a video of it, me mailing it, and
So
I paid for all of it out of my own pocket.
and so George, we aren't protected by the Constitution?
Well, we're actually under international law, and we're protected. Really, I'm getting ready to file a claim under the ICCPR, international human rights violations under the UN. That now our government and our agents have failed to do their job.
Well, are we not protected by the Constitution?
No, you go into court, the judges today laugh at the Constitution because they know that they're not foreign agents. Let me read down here a little further, okay?
Yeah, but I don't understand it. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason why law is necessary and full disclosure going to specificity into play, commercial proceedings, once you're summoned into any of these private merchant corporate courts outlined under Title 8 of the U.S. Constitution, Sections 22 and 28, the U.S. Code, which in December 26, 1933 and 1949, Statute 3097, Treaty Series 881, Convention of Rights and Duties of the States. Now, there was an international treaty that we were entered into that transferred all of our statutes into international law in our courts, but nobody told any of the citizens that, did they?
Give me an example of a statute in international law.
International statutes are outlined under the UCCPR, International Human Rights Convention. It's a rule. It's a rule of the international law that corresponds with the Constitution. In our case, it's, right here it says Title 28 USC 3097.
George,
Okay, that's a statute. That means that's a law that was passed by Congress and is recorded in the United States Code.
George, what's it mean to us? What does it do to our?
We've been robbed. Everybody in this country is being robbed of our rights by these judges who do not respect their place or their place of authority or their obligation to the citizens, we the people of the United States, who are supposed to be their employers. All they do is they protect corporate interest over everything else.
What?
The judges are only interested in protecting the corporate interest in corporations and their employees and assigns, and the average citizen who pays the taxes gets stepped on and pushed into the dirt.
It's my experience that all the judges are interested in is getting money out of people.
Well, that's all they are. That's all they are. And it goes on here to say, okay, the statutes on international law placing all states under all states' rights and duties stated. Congress replaced statutes with international law, placing all states under international law December 9, 1945. The Organization and Immunities Act relinquished every office of the United States to the United Nations. Title 8 U.S.C. 1481 stated that once an oath of office is taken, citizenship is relinquished. Thus, you become a foreign entity, agent, or a state. That means that every public office is a foreign state, including all political subdivisions, i.e. every single court, and that court's personnel is considered a separate foreign entity.
And that happens when what? They take an oath?
Once they take their oath of office. because you got to realize, if you're under international law, you can't, even under federal law, you can't be a corporate representative and still be an unbiased person. So by making you relinquish your citizenship so that you can exercise your authority under international law, you know, you can't have it both ways.
Does that mean
So
every
then,
member of Congress who took an oath,
they had to relinquish that according to this, and not one will answer this question. Not one. Because they know that the only answer is the law is the law. Ignorance of the law is nothing else. It's ignorance. You know what the law is. You've got this statute right in front of you. It's listed under 22 CFR 92, period, 12-92, comma, 31, FR heading, foreign relationship state that our oath of office is required to take before you can take your office.
George,
So before you can take your office as a congressman or senator, you have to sign that oath of office, which automatically relinquishes you as a citizen of the United States.
is that so, George, really?
What?
Is that so?
Well, all I can do is I told you where it's published at.
Now,
It's
you're,
Title 8 USC 1481 of the United States Code. It was enacted in 1945 under the International Organization and Immunities Act.
all right. Now, George, you're running for Congress,
Yes.
and you are going to win the Republican primary because your opposition withdrew.
Well, I'll win. I already go through to the. I already advanced to the general election because my opposition withdrew because I got almost 70,000 votes in the last election. He got like 20,000.
So you are going to have a Republican candidacy. Is that so?
I am a Republican candidate. Yes.
Yeah, and you're going to have it now, and you're up to the general election. George, did you say if it is true that you have to relinquish your citizenship, you will not take an oath of office?
I will not. I've already stated that to the Federal Election Commission. I've asked the Federal Election Commission for a ruling that to either verify or show me where in the Constitution this treaty has been abolished or modified. I've asked all members of Congress if it comes down to me taking a public office in a foreign corporation over retaining my citizenship in the United States of America, I will forfeit the election and then give it to the Democratic opponent.
Really? Well, that means
Yes.
that means that Donald Trump is no longer a citizen of the United States.
According to this, anybody who's taken an oath of office has relinquished their citizenship, whether they knew it or not. They should have known it. They should have been told about it. They are no longer citizens of the United States. So every candidate out there running now who holds an office in the government, state or federal, that has taken that oath of office, they're really not qualified to even run because they are no longer citizens of the legislative or judicial district that they run from.
All right. Now, George, this of course is staggering. I will have to come back to you. I will have to come back to you for another talk.
Okay, no problem.
And if they are not citizens of the United States, then what are they?
They are they're foreign sovereigns is what they're called. That means they are sovereign. They have a separate private corporation as a foreign sovereign, and that they have relinquished any and all of their alleged judicial or executive immunity if they violate their oath of office.
Okay, what I get out of this is, number one, the United States is not a government, it's a corporation.
It is not a government, no.
It is a corporation.
It's a federal corporation and not a government, including the Judiciary Procedures Section.
And this started in 1871, 1933, and then you said there was a...
1871 when they abolished when they took over and turned everything in the United States over to the
Okay,
corporation.
give me a chance to finish my sentence.
Yes.
1871, 1933, and I believe you mentioned a 1944.
1945, 1949 is when the action took place. It's December 26, 1933-1949, Statute 3097, Treaty Series 881, the Convention of Rights and Duties of the States.
And then I am to gather from this that if you take an oath of office, you're not a citizen of the USA anymore.
Right.
And you will not relinquish your citizenship.
I will not relinquish my citizenship. I was born
Okay.
a free person in the United States of America.
Okay.
And I was unaware until just this year that these laws exist. They've been secreted from myself and every other person in the United States, and that's
Okay.
why we are now like $22 trillion in debt.
So this is very shocking news, isn't it?
But
This is very shocking news.
yes,
It's a very shocking situation.
what's more shocking is nobody, even after almost 800 people have been notified and the courts, that no one will answer the question.
Nobody's, and this was how long ago you asked them?
Oh, this is May 1st. I sent out.
Yeah, and today is June 1st.
yeah.
Okay.
All
All right.
May 1st. Today's June 1st. But I mean, I started it with all the members of the House and Senate back in July last year.
Well, George.
2017.
Okay, now George McDermott, I want to thank you for your effort. And
Okay.
what you're doing, I want to thank you for trying to explain it to us. I think I'll have to revisit it again to follow it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is your assistant there? I heard somebody in the background with you.
Yeah, my friend Gregory Washburn is here. Did you want to talk to him?
Yes, if possible.
Okay, George McDermott, this is Gregory Washburn. Gregory, this is George.
Oh, hi, George.
How you doing, Gregory?
Hi, I'm pretty good, so.
Are you the one who puts up the internet work for Glendora?
Yes, yeah, I try to assist her on that, yeah.
Well, you know, I do a news clip every time. I mean, I've got 1,167 videos up there right now at secretjustice.com.
Oh, yeah?
And every time I go to a court, I stand outside the court, or I'm going for a proceeding, and I record exactly. So all these things that I'm telling you, you'll see me standing outside of the various state and federal courts, reciting exactly what's happening to our nation's court system.
Yes, uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and I would like to send in some clips up to Glendora, you know, it's news clips to her, but you know, it can't get an email address or anything. She said she can't see them, but maybe you could.
Oh, yeah, maybe I could, so, yeah.
Because you're welcome. This is all public documents. I mean, if I was wrong, okay, just look at it this way. If I was wrong, how in the world would I be able to run as a sixth-term candidate for the United States Congress after asking for the impeachment and indictment of over 200 state and federal judges?
Uh-huh.
I would be under the jail.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I see.
Okay.
I think I see, yeah.
So I just all my stuff is this is all thanks to Glendora. I started this because of Glendora.
Yeah.
When I first met her, when she told me about getting this stuff out. Unfortunately, I am a dinosaur born in the 21st century when it comes to electronic computer hosting stuff.
Yeah, Glendora's got she's got a Gmail address. Glendora, do you want to have your address, your email? So her Gmail address is, a chat with Glendora at gmail.com.
Okay.
And I read her Gmail every day or every other day at least, and I assist her on that, taking care of her business a little bit.
Okay. No, I just figured, she might want to pick up on, because these are all, I was in court all day yesterday. I was in the FBI offices yesterday, made a video in Baltimore. I made a video in the U.S. District Court in Baltimore and Greenbelt, the U.S. Trustee's office in Greenbelt, is the U.S. Attorney's office in Greenbelt. Everybody lacks jurisdiction. No one can hear all of these people are saying they lack jurisdiction to investigate fraud on the court and conspiracy and obstruction of justice. And so I just when I make the video, I put it up there and let people see what is really going on, because like right now, I've got to get down to the Court of International Claims and federal claims in D.C. I've got to file a motion because I'm letting them know I'm taking action in the Court of International Justice, and that I'm going to have to go up to New York to file a claim under the ICCPR because I've gotten right now over 500 unsigned orders from courts.
Oh yeah. So you have you put your videos on your website. Do you put them on? Do you post them on YouTube at all?
I can't get them on. Like I said, I haven't even got my website for my Congress. I spend so much time helping other people in court that I don't even have time to put my own stuff up. But I have Dick Wolfley, which used to do Glendora's. He puts up all of them when I send them to him in Florida. He posts them on my website. But I feel this is relevant evidence. This is relevant to the survival of our nation. That we can't let these justices and judges be making laws that diminish the integrity of our Constitution.
That's Glendora's Gmail address, and if you could, I don't know if you could send a video to her in an email, possibly.
I'll send you one right now. Like I said, all my stuff is posted. I just got a letter from President Trump the other day thanking me for informing him of treason against the Constitution involving the courts.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, and it's there's a little, but on the same day I got that, I got a letter from the Office of the Inspector General stating that we have no jurisdiction to investigate fraud in the courts or fraud by the courts. Now, the President's letter was signed. The Office of the Inspector General's no signature whatsoever. So that's, right off the bat, that's a fraud.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's something. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Glendora's.
Write down secretjustice.com, and when you click on it, you'll see the videos come right up, and you'll see that I've got 1,167 different videos posted there.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah, I've heard of your website. I heard of your website before, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all I can do is give people the key. If they use a key to open the door to get educated, that's great. If they refuse to use the key, then they stay in the darkness.
Yeah. Uh huh.
And that's all I can do. It's just like Glendora. She's enlightened people. I've been to many of her court proceedings
Oh yeah.
in New York. Yeah. I mean, and she was a real fighter. She still is a fighter.
Yeah.
God has her on a different path right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I went up to court with her. I've been up and seen her. I wish I could get back up there and see her again, and I will if God willing the creek don't rise.
Okay. All right. Oh yeah. Okay.
But
all right.
I will see if I can get off here and email you up something, but I've only got an hour to get to court. So I'll have to do it after 5 o'clock or something.
Okay. All right. So.
Okay.
Okay. I guess Glendora will speak with you again, I suppose.
Okay, I'm sure she will.
All right.
She always wants to tell me the latest joke.
Okay.
Oh.
Glendora, do you want to?
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to tell him a joke or something there?
Okay, I'll tell you some jokes.
Okay.
I shoved the camera. Is it in place?
Oh, it's okay. So yeah,
It's okay?
your chair's right ahead of you then.
Is that okay?
Oh, you got your. All right, get that off. So.
Okay, George. Let's see. The lawyer says, I want a new trial on the basis of new evidence. And the judge says, what's the new evidence? And the lawyer says, I just found out my client has another $10,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the lawyer says, I'll take your case on a retainer basis. And that will be $3,000. That entitles you to 2 questions. And the client says, $3,000, 2 questions, isn't that expensive? Perhaps the lawyer said, what's your second question?
Yeah. Did you realize that there's never been a law passed that allows lawyers to represent us in court?
Really, yeah, I wouldn't believe, yeah.
There's never been an amendment to our Constitution that allows that.
Yeah?
They're all straw men.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are all fictitious
Yeah.
agents who are raping the
Yeah.
Constitution in the United States.
Yeah, you ought to stand in court and just say one thing, where's your statutory authority?
That's exactly what I say.
Okay, listen, this has been long enough, George, okay?
Well, thank you, Glendora. You have a blessed day.
I'm trying, and I'll try again.
Your friend's name again?
Gregory Washburn.
Gregory.
Washburn.
Washburn?
Yes, Washburn.
Yeah, it's nice to speak with you, George.
Nice to speak with you, George.
You don't happen to know... I was in business with Washburn down here in Washington, D.C. I'll send you an email, Gregory.
Sure.
And you'll have a blessed day.
Okay, you too. So.
Thank you.
All right, bye now. So.
Well, George?
Huh?
George, may the peace of God, which passes all understanding, rule in your heart and mind. Amen.
Amen to that.
All right, dear.
God bless.
You say bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to a chat with Glendora with no technical advantage. But you know what? Let me show you something. How have you been all week? Have you found your peace with God? I'll help you. And you do help me. And I'll help you. But look, last week we did hats, a hat with Glendora. We did hats 11 through 20. The first week we did hats 1 through 10. This week we're going to do hats 21 through 30. Oh, this one is so much fun to wear with a yellow pants and a yellow jacket. No, not a yellow, yeah, a yellow jacket. And then I have another jacket that is plaid and has a lot of yellow in it. Oh, this one is so much fun. Okay. A Chat with Glendora. A show for living right. And that is certainly its intent. I hope it gets across for you. This is a winter white. Nice, huh? Very warm. It's fuzzy. Fuzzy inside as well as outside. Here's a fedora, and a very well put together fedora. Glendora fedora. Now, do you like this one? Oh, this one is so old, folks. But it's a great color. And I tried to patch it up, and I really didn't succeed. I would like to hear what you're saying about all these hats. Now this hat came from the state of Maine, from my nephew, Stephen Richard Folsom, and his wife, Terry. It's a very expensive hat, and really well made. The stitching is marvelous. Don't you admire the stitching? A pair of socks, you know, this suit, these hats. And then you can take a string, a ball of crochet, and take a string, and you can do this with it, and this with it, and this with, and come out with a beautiful sweater. Somehow or other, is that how the universe is made? Is that how the universe is made? Just by these wonderful patterns and paths and convolutions? I don't know. I guess we'll never know how the universe is made. But we don't have to. We love it as it is made. Oh, it's so grand. And here it is, June. And the longest days of the year, folks. Why, the days are what, 16 hours long now? From 5 o'clock and 5:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. We're coming into the summer solstice. You remember when you started the winter solstice? When we were with the earth? As it started its trip around the sun, and it takes a year to do that. But there is no beginning and there's no ending. There's no beginning and there's no ending. You just pick a day arbitrarily. And by the way, New Year's Day is December 21st. It is not January 1st. The calendar is so mixed up. New Year's 2019 starts December 21st. It could be the 20th, though, or the 22nd. A Chat with Glendora. Just need another inch here. Now this little one, Gregory, bought me a tiny hat pin, a hat pin, to go on this hat. He never bought me a present before. It's the only present he ever bought me, and he paid a quarter for it. Wow. And it's a show that we mean it to be inspiration. It is the show with the most important message that in all public access TV. The all-important message. You give up self, you give up ego, and you just spend your time helping others. Then you will find the reward, the peace, happiness, the joy that you've been looking for. This is fun, isn't it? Orange. It's a little late probably for October, Halloween. Oh, not Halloween, All Hallows Eve. Oh, isn't this nice? Another fedora. Purple. Grand purple. This is the most expensive one. I think it was $45. That's an awful lot of money to pay for a hat. But it is purple. And stay away from bird feathers because they belong to the bird. Well, gee whiz, are we already down to the 10th one? Well, it's really one of the all-time favorites. And so many people, you know, say, oh, I love your hat. Oh, your hat is nice. Yet they don't wear hats. But that's showing their love for hats. They don't wear them, but they see one and then they remember how nice it is to wear hats. And you gentlemen too. As many gentlemen, maybe more gentlemen, comment on the hats as ladies. I had a brand new vegan announcement to show you folks. I've been working on it all week and looking forward to showing it to you, people in Queens. And now I can't get these monitors work and I can't get these players to work. So I'll just have to tell you about the commercial. I'll just do it for you. It's 30 seconds. Just a second. Just 30 seconds. There's a joke about that too. Harry was talking to God and he said, God, how much is $1 million to you? God said $10. And Harry said, well, God, how long is 1,000,000 years to you? God said, a second. Harry says, can I have $10? And God said, certainly, just a second. Okay, I'll do the commercial for you. Let me put down my snowman hands. Now this is on broadcast TV, folks. That's like Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 6, Channel 7, Channel 5, Channel 9. It is not cable TV. This is broadcast TV. And this commercial is going on the last week of June, June 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Monday through Friday on the 6 p.m. news on Channel 10, Albany, the capital district of the state of New York, the Empire State. Here it is. Hi folks. Computers are in the Bible. Eve said to Adam, do you want an apple too? The next time you go to the supermarket, bypass the meat counter, go to the frozen food cases, and load up your grocery cart with veggie meat, hamburger, chicken, turkey, ham. 90 years old, no doctors, no medicine. And my cat is vegan also. Now, it is a knockout at the end because here's a close-up of .com cat, and she's beautiful. And she's looking up to some person to say, please, my vegan kibble. And she's 98 years old. And tomorrow is my husband's birthday, June 3rd, and he will be 99 years old. And he is my connubial joy and my conjugal bliss. Well, the negotiation of that commercial, folks, took skillful management, dexterity, and adroitness. I called up the TV station and I said, how much is a 30-second announcement on the 5 p.m. news? $250. I said, I will make you an offer. I'll take 5 of them for $1,000. No. Payment will be up front by postal money order. No. I'll give you the August order, which will be $900 in August because the inventory is way down because people don't watch television so much in the summertime. $900, I'll give you that order. Okay. And so now, last week we made the commercial, and that was the big work of last week. I'd better get going here, because we're here to remind you of something that you already know. I'm going to start with a story, and the story is about a man who saw a jewel, and he loved that jewel, and the jewel was really highly priced. Think of it as a Tiffany jewel. Think of it as Tiffany 10 to the third power. This is a lot of money. So the man went out and folks, and he sold everything that he had, everything. He sold everything to get the money to buy that jewel. Do you know what's coming up? Guess what that jewel is? Helping others. Helping others. And guess what selling everything was? It was selling everything ego, everything selfish. So that all he had left was that helping others. Now you're afraid to do that, aren't you? You're afraid you're going to lose all your fun. No, that's where the deception is. That's where the serpent deceives you. He promises you the fun, but he can't deliver it. The only thing that can deliver it is helping others. Enjoy with everybody. Moving the universe forward. Keeping it going and growing. All working together. Helping others. The serpent is a sham, a scam, a fake, not reality. It can't deliver anything. But once you go out and help others, everything comes your way. Everything comes your way. All the peace that you wanted, the success, the finances, the comfort, everything comes your way. You're in flow with the universe. God, helping others, Christ, or any religion, they're all synonymous. They're all interchangeable. This you will find out if you will go to your sanctuary, your alone place with God, and listen to this voice inside of you, this God inside of you, because that is the soul, and that is the God that is inside of you. And the God that is inside of you is the same God that's inside of the next person, and the next person, and the next person.